Backcountry Colorado, hiking, backpacking.
I did a lot of marathons. I was convinced to do some ultras.
Climbing, and I do filming and photography.
I just like the ultras because I love the community. I just think that everybody is so nice, whether they're the first place finishers or, you know, us that kind of mosey along.
Welcome to the first episode of Dispatch Radio, a new outdoor adventure storytelling podcast coming to you from Boulder, Colorado. We're going to start off by introducing you to some of our regular co-hosts to give you a sense of what you'll be hearing from our show over the coming months. Then we'll jump into our first studio session, recorded not in the outdoors, but in a basement. You'll hear our very first dispatch from a local mountain biker who's had a long road to recovery, as we talk about injury and how it affects those of us who tend to define ourselves through our outdoor adventures. Stick around to hear from the winners of our very first Story Slam. One story is about saving a baby during an ultramarathon, and in the other story, we hear of an adventurer swimming with alligators and sleeping among jaguars. Also, check out the other episodes we just released on iTunes. If you like the outdoors, you're sure to find some stories you can relate to or be inspired by. And maybe along the way, we'll get to hear your story too. Let's do this. Hey, my name is Corey Fain, and I like mountains. And I like the people that I've met on mountains. And I like going on adventures in mountains. And hopefully on the show, we can bring some of those stories and bring your stories to the forefront.
Hey, I'm Scott Jones, and I am basically unemployable entrepreneur who loves the mountains. I've been in health and fitness forever. I've started tons of businesses in the world of health and fitness, hobby businesses to things that I'm really passionate about. One of them is telling stories about people who are way more interesting than me, and I'm excited to bring those stories to you guys.
Hi, I'm Kelly McConnell. I am a yogi and think like a yogi, but I also play in the mountains and like to do anything you want me to do. And so call me. To run 20 miles. That's it. I'm really social, so I'm going to bring some great special guests.
I'm Russ Rizzo. I am a former journalist turned PR guy who also loves the mountains, enjoys a good beer every once in a while and a pedicure. So just get comfortable with the guys that do paint my toes. And what I hope to bring to the show is bring really interesting people from multiple different disciplines to the show and having interesting conversations, kind of really replicating what happens in real life. And for me, in my personal life, that means, you know, the conversations I'll have at the climbing crag or on the way to a ski hill or on the way to a running race because I like to do everything.
I'm Sheila Huss. I am a wife and a mom, a Coke Zero drinking, bacon eating, balance lacking, perpetually dehydrated, sleep deprived, working ultra runner and mountain climber. I'd like to sign up for epic shit from the comfort of my couch and then freak out and figure out the details later. And as far as what I bring to the show, I want to look for creative ways that people find to balance different aspects of their lives, from adventure and training to, you know, balancing work, family, and other obligations.
Hi, I'm Sean Franklin, more of the recreational guy that's kind of turned his life around from mountain biking. And my passion, what I want to bring to the show, I dabble in a little bit of all the outdoor sports. I like the mountains like someone else did. What I want to bring is a passion for just getting outside, whatever it is you enjoy. Find something that you're passionate about, because otherwise you're not going to keep doing it. And obviously emphasis on mountain biking, talking about mountain biking. I work in television, radio, but for fun I announce mountain bike races for the Colorado High School League. I've been doing that for 5 years. We'll talk about that as the show progresses as well. And so, yes, bringing just a love of mountain biking and the outdoors to the show and the passion.
Hi, I'm Lori Nakauchi, and truthfully, I'm kind of an outlier in any kind of outdoor sports. I think of myself as like the secret Asian with secret powers, because I'm a school teacher, and some of the stuff that I do is sort of out there and different. Stuff like being a hockey thug and running ultras. So I bring a lot of history and background to the podcast. I'm kind of the old school ultra runner who's been doing this for over 20 years. So when your motto's why not, you try a lot of different stuff.
Hey,
I'm Nick Bronya. I used to be an adventure guide in the Eastern Sierras of California. I moved back home to Colorado about 6 years ago to be closer to the mountains that I really love. I love living like a dirtbag climber, drinking some good beers, and getting myself into tons of trouble by going on adventures that I may or may not be qualified for.
I'm Tony, Monreal, Antonio, if you're feeling exotic. I guess by definition, I'd be a masochist because I hang out with some real sick puppies that like getting, too many miles and all the good stories, It's neat going through the experience, kind of dabbling in these long distances, and I'm just trying to represent the blue-collar man who's new to the sport and trying to evolve with it and kind of find myself in the process.
Hey, welcome everybody to Dispatch Radio, literally episode number 1. Lori, we're in your basement. Like, what are we doing here? Describe the scene.
How many of us are there? One to count.
There's a lot of
Sitting
us.
around with a lot of microphones and cords and beer. Just try to get started.
Right on. Yeah, we've got, I think, 9 people around the table. All-star cast. People can learn about who we are through our bios on the pod, and we'll mix in a little bit in this episode as well. But Scott, you're the professional podcasting dude around here. Like, what? Tell us about the situation.
I was going to say who we aren't are people that sit in a basement and talk all night, right? That's definitely who we aren't. I don't know. I'm sitting here thinking of the irony of starting a show with a bunch of passionate people
Inside.
that love podcasts, that love outdoors, sitting on our butts, drinking beer, all getting fat and happy with microphones and technical stuff.
I asked Corey if all this equipment was portable to do a hike together, and he said maybe episode 2.
Yeah. What?
We might be able to get that.
How is that possible? It just took us 40 minutes to even get close to recording tonight.
You don't have a pack that will hold all this?
Yeah,
You and I do.
We're out of here. We thought this was a professional situation. And Sheila, I'd like from your perspective, you drove the furthest to get here. From your perspective,
Yeah, let her talk before we
what's
have
happening?
to kick her out because she's got to drive home.
Right. Before you have to leave. Tell us what's going on tonight. What? What's happening?
Yes, silence.
Sheila, you're the most dedicated because your daughter and husband are also late.
Yeah, your daughter and
That's
husband
dedication.
are on the floor. That would be
Forgot they were over
that
there.
would be worth noting. Yes.
Yeah, that's
We're good.
what happens when you
That
live in
was
Palmer
even
Lake.
more.
Your daughter goes to school
Never
in
happened.
Springs. You work in Denver, and your friends are all up in Lakewood, Golden, Boulder.
Yeah.
Lots of miles in the car.
And I think one good thing
And the
for-
legs.
What did you do this weekend?
I did the Hemes 50 miler.
Yeah, and tell us just a little bit about it.
Well, I learned about it on the course. Didn't have time to do much preparation in advance. So on the first couple miles of the course, I learned what was in store for me. And I think probably the most interesting part in terms of ultras, 200 yards is usually pretty meaningless. On the course, a friend said there's going to be a 200-yard really technical section, and I kind of dismissed it and kept moving. Hit an aid station, and the worker said, the next 200 yards, there's no real trail, just go straight down, and you're not going to be able to stay upright, so grab onto trees.
Wow.
Won't be 200 yards I'll forget anytime soon.
Nice.
It was rough.
Sheila, I'd like to thank you for your reaction. I've just for the first time in my life as a 37-year-old man spit my drink on a stranger. Because when Russ asked you the question, you looked at him like he just took your child from you. It was unbelievable. And Kelly, I'd like to apologize on air for our first episode for spitting on you.
It may not be the last.
I'm not a llama. I'm not an
Definitely is the
alpaca.
first.
He brought me a towel.
Yes, I did.
Oh, what a
I cleaned
gentleman.
up.
What a gentleman.
I'm a nice guy.
It's
Scott
too bad
Jones,
the camera
everybody.
wasn't on because her expressions were flashing.
Oh my, is awesome.
Pure terror.
Pure terror.
You guys are all experienced with like podcasting
No,
and
we're
radios.
not.
And
No,
just-
it's
I'm
just
like
talking.
nursing the
Is that
sweat.
what
I'm
we
a
call
nervous
this?
wreck.
Remember, when Scott does this, he's alone in his bed. Like, he doesn't have a.
guys sound experienced.
It's basically a live studio.
I'm
audience.
sweating more now than I do when I run.
Yeah, but he talks to like Ian Sharman and Liza Howard
Yeah, I
like
thought-
on a regular basis.
I'm just I'm a naive idiot who's very curious, and that makes the world go around. And I mean, the speaking thing, when I get people on the Athlete on Fire stuff, like the first thing I tell them, even if they're really good athletes, is pretend like you're presenting to somebody, because you can get in. This is easy to not get into into just cruise control. But when you're on, I do most of it over the computer. So when you can get in cruise control telling your story. Like if you pretend like you're talking in front of a bunch of people and you want them to be energized, then it kind of brings everything together. But Sheila, best freaking expression I've ever seen in my life, dude. Awesome. So I have a question. Can I ask a question? Are you guys like, this is weird, like 8 people around the table. This isn't normal for a podcast. So it's kind of cool. But is anybody overwhelmingly nervous or excited about telling certain stories? Is that why people are here?
I just think it's really cool. As Scott was saying, he's used to one person talking to a mic, and I did a lot of that in radio. But I also had a sports talk show where we'd have 3 or 4 people, but having 8 people here and some that, but having this many people and not everyone having experience and, silent Sheila, just, no, you were great. You're
secret Asian
here and
did you
having
say,
her host and everyone coming together is really, really cool.
She said Asian.
And Corey setting us all up and having everything work, which apparently it kind of works, is awesome. So
I think we're actually recording.
Kudos to you guys. I've been trying to do something like this for a long time with people that didn't have their manure together, and you guys do a great job. So very excited.
Yes, no explicit flag yet.
Yeah, right on. All right, so you guys ready to get into the black eye at least? Anybody have any guesses how one might get a black eye? I was in I'll give you some details. I was in San Diego. It happened the first 3 hours of my trip, and it was weekend-long bachelor festivity. Anybody
not surfing?
Not surfing. That was the number one guess at the urgent care that I was
not in the security line.
Sir, you can't touch the strippers.
stripper pole accident?
Right. That's another good guess. It was not a stripper pole accident. It was, so we get off the plane and we're still, not everybody had even arrived from the trip. And we're like, just tossing around the football by the beach, playing some tag. And my buddy, he gets rushed, like a quarterback sneak kind of rush, and throws the ball in the air. Well, I don't see it. I'm running full speed, and the guy covering me stops, and I just smash into his head. And I'm sitting in an urgent care within the first 3 hours of my 4-day-long beach vacation.
It's all fun and games until someone gets their nose broke.
It's just a game, Fokker.
But thankfully it was my face and not the the.
Well, when I went to my buddy's wedding in California, he disappeared the night before the wedding. He's the one getting married. The groom disappeared, returned at 4 a.m. with a black eye the day before, or the day of his wedding. So it's not quite as bad as what you experienced. They are actually with 2 little ones. It was a train wreck of a wedding, and everyone didn't think it was. Even the dad. I should probably not say this, but even the dad of the daughter or the bride was saying some things like, "Well, this is a side of him we haven't seen before, and we hope he doesn't stick around for very long."
Yeah, I have a trail.
You've had a black eye?
Yeah, I got it running.
Let's hear about your black eye.
Running down the trail. Memorial Day 3 years ago, running down Apex Trail, and I caught my toe. It's like slow motion. You're like,
why were you chasing your toe?
No.
Ouch.
Well, and I actually could see the rock as I was hitting it. But luckily, I wasn't far from the trailhead.
Yeah.
And my eye swelled up, and
trail wasn't far.
I didn't have to go to the urgent care though.
I broke one bone and collarbone, so I am officially a cyclist.
You didn't break it that made you a cyclist, or you?
No, I was mountain biking for a good 12 to 15 years before I broke my collarbone. It was the first bone I've ever broken in my body on a trail in my backyard that I ride all the time. Not literally in my backyard, but near my house. And launched, caught the front wheel, launched off. And I knew right away when my whole side of my body went numb that something was different and wrong, because that's never happened before. And about 45 minutes later, I knew something was wrong because it hurt. Collarbone story.
You know what? I actually work as a body worker with athletes, and people come to me all the time with injuries. And what I find the most interesting is that there's so many athletes who just continue to do things when they shouldn't. And there's this drive that they have where they're not taking care of themselves. And I really wonder what that's all about. What's more important to them. And It's just a really big thing.
I can't use my right Achilles tendon until I've been up for like an hour every day. Like I'm like,
That's two of us.
But like I just don't even do anything about it.
Well, and do you think there's like a different kind of pain sensor? Like sometimes athletes don't sense pain the same way?
Yeah, and I find that all the time, especially with the pressure that I give during body work. It's like a lot of athletes who do some really hardcore endurance sports. I'm putting all my body weight, everything I've got into it, and I'm like, you like this. They like the pain. The more the pain, the better. And everyone who comes in there who's a pretty hardcore athlete, they're like, nothing is hard enough.
We're masochists, I'm telling you.
It's actually really.
Like Tony said, masochists.
Yeah, there's this pressure to push through the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that pain's trying to tell you something.
Yeah, almost always.
and also really like how their sport defines who they are as a person. I find that to be really common too. It's like, if I'm not doing this, then who am I?
And I think that's a good lead in for our first story, which deals with injury, which is something that we as endurance athletes and people who love being outdoors and being a part of the action whenever we can be, sometimes we have to face that. And sometimes it's a season, sometimes it's only a couple weeks, or sometimes it's a couple of years. So let's listen to Andrew's story.
This is a story about injury and the strength we pull from the unlikeliest of places. I should preface this story by explaining that my injury occurred in a failed attempt at a multi-week backcountry mountain bike race from Canada to Mexico via the Continental Divide, known as the Tour Divide, in June of 2014. My preparation, experiences, and post-race recovery, as well as many other two-wheeled adventures and short stories, including this one, can all be found at singletrackstories.com. My bike takes me places school never could, or so says the bumper sticker on my car. As a middle school teacher, this is probably heresy, but at times I've found it to be true. This is not one of those times. Last week, one of my 7th grade students brought me a letter. Being the week before Christmas break, this was not out of the ordinary, but this one was different. There were no Starbucks gift cards, chocolate caramels, or homemade cookies. This was simply a piece of paper, folded in half as a card, with colorful kid scratch on the front. Feel better, Mr. Schuhmann. It is often said that teaching is full of magical, fulfilling moments. While I've certainly had my share, the truth remains that working with kids can often feel like a grind as much as a gift. The honest reality is that while many people define themselves through their work, and that is fine, I simply do not. I've always found traipsing in the mountains to be more magical and fulfilling on a personal level than anything I've ever done in a career. While others romance about how teaching is a passion and a calling for them, teaching has always been a cool job for me, a means to an end. The fact that I get to hang out with kids all day, talk about the world, its history, and its people is an added bonus. The fact that I get summers to pursue my cycling and outdoor dreams, super bonus. Lately, however, the bike has been taking me a whole lot of nowhere, and these dreams have been on hold, this identity in crisis. Over 6 months have passed since my failed attempt at the Tour Divide, and my body refuses to recover from the crippling tendinitis I've earned in each Achilles. Plans for the winter have already fallen through, and now equally for the spring as well, with planned races, bikepacking overnights, ski passes, and hut trips canceled, substituted for more indoor couch time. My doctor and online research tell me it's because of limited blood flow to the tendon, astronomically prolonging healing times. Now I know what pacified the warrior Achilles. Not an arrow in the heel, but tendinitis. With an inability for activity in the spring and signs pointing to a possible recovery time of up to 1 year, it's hard to be hopeful for the upcoming summer. But my student didn't know any of this. The week that she gave me the card, I was currently sporting 2 Durfee medical boots, one on each ankle to immobilize both tendons. She took notice, as did 160 of her peers, and assumed I had broken my ankles over the weekend, as did 160 of her peers. Try explaining tendinitis to 160 12-year-olds. But the real injury was far more sinister and persistent than that. She didn't know that I had spent the last 6 months trying to overcome what has been the most challenging, persistent, and discouraging physical setback of my 30 years. She didn't know that 3 months of physical therapy produced little to no improvement, only to be abandoned in disillusionment when I reached the limit of visits that insurance would allow, 21. She didn't know about the countless optimistic moments when recovery seemed so close. Hope was restored, new training regimens were mapped out, and events booked. And she didn't know about the countless tears of frustration and disappointment when a return to minor activity refuted even the smallest of ambitions. She didn't know that, time after time, month after month, familiar pains revisited with a vengeance, hope crushed, training postponed, bookings canceled. She had never met the supportive wife turned therapist, repeatedly counseling and consoling a man who measures his years by the trips, excursions, trails, and valleys explored and miles conquered. She also didn't know that the realization that this injury could last another 6 months had come only days before she put this card into my hands with a smile. The prior weekend, my wife and I, amped up on yet another moment of hope and enthusiasm after a month of promising recovery and added strength, departed on a 5-mile snowshoe trek to a backcountry ski hut just outside of Leadville, Colorado, in the Mount Massive wilderness known as Uncle Bud's Cabin. The trip had been planned since July, when I occupied my time while laid up from my failed Tour Divide attempt by planning new adventures for the winter, one of my wife's many therapeutic recommendations. Surely by December, I would be fully healed. The original plan was to snowbike to the hut on shiny new rigs provided via a local bike shop sponsorship, which I also worked to acquire while laid up in July. Those plans had long since been abandoned, along with the sponsorship, amidst much disappointment, but the booking for the hut remained. Surely, after 6 months, I should be able to hike 5 miles, right? Uncle Bud's Cabin has a relatively gentle approach as far as backcountry huts go, which would have been ideal for snowbiking, even better for a damaged hiker. The first 4 miles were on a gently inclining fire road, with the remaining 1.5 miles on a steeper but well-packed snow trail. Moving slowly, the fire road relented without complaint, and I luxuriated inhaling the chilled, thin air into my lungs, filled with pine, sunblock, and snow. Confidence soared. But as we left the road and turned onto the steeper trail, the increased angle on each heel quickly crippled me, and each tendon began to take on the consistency and flexibility of calcified wood, a sickening, all too familiar sensation. Knowing I was in trouble, I walked backwards up the steepest portions, or angling side to side, but there was nothing to do but reach the hut, and I paid a high price for it. It was not until I had removed my boots and sat down that I knew the extent to which I had relapsed my injury. I might as well have just gotten off the bike in Montana that June all over again. Once activity stopped, both tendons seized and knotted, furious at me for my insubordinates, and painful to the touch. I succumbed to waddling around the cabin like a wooden duck, my wife trying to massage out the knots that night with an apple as nerve pain flared up my entire body. Coming down the next day was a real challenge, as I recognized that every step I took for the next 5 miles would dig me further into a hole that could well take another 6 months to recover from. My student didn't know any of this. She didn't know that once we finally reached our vehicle and placed our gear in the back, I stared at that bumper sticker on the back window. My bike takes me places that school never could, knowing now more than ever what I had denied for too long. My bike would not be taking me anywhere for much, much longer than I had ever imagined. She didn't know that the car ride home was silent, as we both struggled in our own way to come to grips with this realization. Myself checking off all the future trips or races I had planned for the spring and summer that I would again have to abandon, while struggling to comprehend that the previous 6 months of healing had all but been undone, and another 6 months or longer of couch incarceration would follow. My wife, in turn, searched for something to say to make it all more palatable. An hour into the drive, she finally broke the silence with something along the lines of, "When we get home, we'll find something that you can do this spring." But I was sobbing inconsolably before she could finish her sentence. All that this student knew was that her teacher had had a rough weekend, and now had a boot on each ankle.
And she couldn't know that her kind gesture would turn him into a bubbling mess again that evening as he read the letter over and over, not in self-pity over another 6 months of inactivity, but that one person so young could be so sweet, kind, and thoughtful. And it hit home that sometimes my students can take me to places that my bike never will.
Dear Mr. Schuhmann, I hope your foot feels better soon. Thank you for coming to class on Tuesday, even though I know your foot hurt. Just think that when you get your boot off, you can go bike riding and do your favorite sports. I hope you feel better. To help the process, here's a funny joke for you. How does the frog feel with a broken foot? Unhappy.
Unhappy. Nailed it.
Have a downer.
That was good.
Yeah, I think
You tell a good story.
Yeah,
Great
and
story.
Thank you.
Good job.
in addition to the great storytelling, I think that's something that we can, at least I can relate to, having spent some time on the bench or in my living room due to injury.
I tell you, when I got the black eye, my first thought was, is this at all going to affect my Dirty 30 coming up in 2 weeks?
Answer's no.
The answer's no, right? Yeah.
And imagine if it's yes, and you're talking about everything you care about for the next 6 months. I mean,
Well, yeah, I think when injury typically happens, you tend to think of, all right, in a month, in 2 months, maybe I'll be back. And that's the crazy thing about tendinitis is that it just, multiply that by 3, by 4, by 5. And that's kind of the window that you're looking at. And I had no idea. When I first got injured, I thought I'd be back on the bike in a month. And it just never happened.
Yeah, when I broke my collarbone, I was out 6 weeks, and that drove me nuts. But I could get on a stationary bike and pedal, and you couldn't do anything. I couldn't imagine being out for that long. I hurt for you, and I feel your pain, and it struck home.
Well, I realized I would not be riding the hardtail 29er, so I sold that. Took up swimming, which is not my favorite sport.
there's not a lot of mountain
a lot of time in the gym,
swim packing.
Yeah, anything, a lot of sit-ups, just anything to be active, and it was tough. And so you talk about, who am I? I was a mountain biker. I would get out. I was going to ride from Canada to Mexico, and now all of a sudden I can't ride 5 miles, and I couldn't do it for a year and a half. It was tough. So there's a lot of athletes out there. That Amelia Boone article that was out there, which is a great read, by the way. I highly recommend it. She kind of hit the nail on the head, and it's just you got to find other things to occupy your time and to keep you sane.
So, Andrew, I have a question. So, with my background, I'm always diving into the prevention leads to performance idea and that whole concept. And we can get specific because there's a lot of people who've dealt with Achilles issues, like whether it's in the belly of the Achilles or if it's an insertional issue. It's a pretty common injury for runners, actually. Like I deal with Achilles issues all the time. Right, it's really common. And I'm sure Kelly could speak to a lot of, I'm guessing that you can speak to a lot of athletes that come in that have Achilles issues, because it's just a lot of the issues have to do with keeping your lower legs loose, and there's imbalances and stuff. But speaking to a specific injury, I think people are listening like, man, I think I might have something similar to what this guy has, and it's really been a brutal situation for you. So, what if you could go back in time and from your PT and things that you've learned, what would be like 2-3 things that are really good preventative causes or preventative measures for preventing that injury specific?
Well, I did a number of things wrong. Number one, I didn't CrossFit, or I didn't cross train, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
CrossFit, bro?
No, not cross train. I thought, I'll ride on the bike and I'll ride a little bit farther and I'll ride a little bit farther. And that was my first mistake. Second mistake, I was starting to have knee pain as I was going farther and farther. And so I got a bike fit about a month and a half before the race. And he moved the cleat forward on my shoe, which is a big no-no in bike packing. When you're doing 100 miles a day, multiple days in a row, you don't want that cleat forward. And I said something to him, and I said, I don't think that's right. And he said, no, because he did ultra rides and stuff, and he did all these Olympic athletes apparently, but I think that was a huge mistake too.
So biomechanically, putting the cleat forward puts more pressure on your knee or your ankle?
On your Achilles. It gives you more power in your stroke.
Right.
But when you are stroking literally I guess we shouldn't say that, but like when you're pedaling millions of times.
It's a redundant sport, yeah.
That's,
as far back as possible.
Yeah. And then with things like the Tour Divide, there was 5 mile snow climb, hikes where you had to hike your bike, and there was a big snow year that year. And so in addition to that was another one. And I wore really stiff-soled shoes, which can be really hard on the Achilles as well.
So you didn't cross train. You had a change in your form basically biomechanically.
Yep.
So those two things probably did you in. And then when you started doing your PT and stuff, what was working? Because when you're dealing with chronic injuries, it takes a long time. You have to be very diligent if you want to get rid of a lot of these chronic injuries. So what was really working that you noticed when you started doing that PT?
The only thing that was really working was time off. And I was not willing to give myself that time off. I was not willing to admit that, usually you think time off a week, 2 weeks, but we're talking 2 months, 3 months. And my therapist at one point told me, because I was okay, when can I get back on the bike? Can I go this weekend? Can I ride here? And finally she told me, you need to stop for the summer.
Yeah.
And I went home and I went straight to bed at like 4:00. I was so depressed. But it hit home and I stopped. And then I went through a couple of doctors and I ended up going to a foot doctor and he got me orthotics. And that made a huge difference too.
Yeah.
So
it's crazy because, most movements in sports, your rehab is getting on a bike.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of crazy, right? So there's that. And then I think I wanted to clear up really quick. Just share with the audience who Amelia Boone is, because there's a lot of people listening who might have no clue.
I don't know either. It was a link shared on Dispatch Radio from a blog post. She's an ultra runner, I think. I don't know much about her.
Yeah.
But Dispatch Radio posted it. Injury and the athlete, and it was a very profound article.
Who is she? Well, I didn't know if you knew or not, but no, she's an elite obstacle course racing athlete. She's dabbling in ultras this year. She's kind of moving over a little bit, and she got hurt this year, and it's a chronic injury. I don't remember exactly.
And self-induced too. It's a broken femur from overuse.
It's a stress fracture.
Yeah,
that's right.
Stress fracture.
Yeah, but she's just a beast. She's an attorney in Chicago, and she's a high-level athlete. And she just talks about like how so much of her identity has come from competing. And I'm sure a lot of people in this room can relate to that. I'm actually on the other end of the spectrum. I feel like I did all my competing in college. I played college sports and stuff, and now I do everything for recreation. And I just ask people about their elite and their big goals, Well, but I think the story is great, Andrew. Seriously.
Yeah. On that note, on the other spectrum, though, Laura, you've never had an injury in 11 years of ultra running.
More than 11 years, right?
Do you cross
20 years?
More than
Yeah.
No,
well,
11 in a row. 11 Leadville.
Actually, they're not in a row, but I think it's a lot of the cross training. When I started, I was in my 20s, and I only did hundreds every other year, which nowadays is not very common. People do.
You're 98? Is that what I got?
We're better.
I'm not the oldest.
That's the Asian gene. We don't age. But I do a lot of cross training now. But for a long time, I only ran. Like miles only counted if you ran. Huh. But I do a lot of cross training now.
So you intentionally did not run 100 1 year so that you could do it the next year?
No, actually, it was an agreement with my ex-husband, and when I have a daughter, so it worked out well. But the benefit to that was I did a lot of duathlons. I did ride the Rockies. I did a lot of other sports, so I think it was a benefit.
Cool. Sheila, how's your injury situation been?
I've never had an injury either.
Yeah, nice.
Probably dumb luck though.
We were talking to Andrew though. A lot of it I think is pure mechanics. Like I can run in any shoe. I mean, I've been able to, but you have to pay attention to your body too. And I think if your identity's really tied up into your sport and you don't listen, and sometimes even if you have a coach, it can be detrimental because you
two need to be careful now because you just got chased.
Yeah, knock on wood.
Well, yeah, we put Andrew literally in the non-injury Oreo cookie here. He's resenting this too late.
Well, I think it just goes to the point that you need to know what you're doing. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was jumping into it, and I had a training plan, but as she said, the more miles, the better. And you read about guys that push through the pain, and that's what I did. I mean, the pain was picking up from day 3, day 4, and I pushed through and I pushed through and I pushed through until I couldn't push through anymore. I couldn't walk anymore by the time I quit.
I think it's cool. We're going to get our first sponsor. It's going to be Apples, the recovery tool.
Using Apple.
Using Apple. All right. Well, Andrew, we wish you all the best We're glad that you're back on a bike, and we look forward to hearing about all your adventures this summer.
A few weeks ago, we set up camp in the back of Mountain Toad Brewing in Golden, Colorado, to host our first ever story jam. We asked people to share their best outdoor story and promised we'd put the winner on the first show. So here goes. This is Erik Sanders, a Golden resident, a member of the local Golden Mountain Runners, who finds time outside his full-time job as an engineer to participate in adventure races throughout the world with Team Yoga Slackers. Here's Erik.
My name is Erik Sanders. I live in Golden, Colorado. The title of my story is 7 Days in Waterworld. So this was last November, and I'm on this team called Team Yoga Slackers, and we are a elite adventure racing team. Yeah, on an elite adventure racing team, and we were at the Adventure Racing World Championships. So this race came at you from the Pantanal, which is basically one of the most remote places in the world. People go there to view wildlife. They could film a National Geographic documentary down there. It's the highest concentration of jaguars. There's 10 million alligators in this region. In adventure racing, they throw you into these situations and try to see how you react. They want to, this is a race, but you're racing through jaguar-infested terrain. There's no trails. There's no course marked. You're navigating with a map and compass.
Are you rocking a machete or what?
It was mandatory you carry a machete. It was also mandatory you carry a garbage bag with you. And why do you think we would carry a garbage bag? I mean, that's kind of an odd thing for a mandatory gear list. But they wanted you to carry a garbage bag that was at least 100 liters or something like that. And that was for the bees. There are Africanized honeybees in the area, and the only way to protect yourself from Africanized honeybees is if you get inside a garbage bag. And you're trekking through the jungle for, almost, you could be trekking for the jungle. You could get lost. You could take your team in the wrong direction, and you come across these Africanized honeybees, and they want to attack you. Like they want to go for you. So the only way to escape them is to get inside the garbage bag, and hopefully they go away. But at the end of it, okay, I haven't even gotten to the story yet, but so this is the basis, and we arrive in Brazil, and I fly into Sao Paulo, and then you take another flight to this town Campo Grande, and then you take a 5-hour bus ride to this town Caramba. And Caramba is on the Bolivia-Brazil border, and it's just sweltering hot. I mean, it's 110 degrees out. It's 90% humidity. All the teams are just in shock of what is happening, and it's just the conditions are insane. And we're all like, what the hell did we just get ourselves into? And then, aside from that, we have the pre-race briefing and all this stuff in Caramba, the town. And we do that whole thing, and then we take a 12-hour boat ride up the Paraguay River to the race start location, which is basically the middle of the nowhere in Pantanal, which is the largest wetland in the world, freshwater wetland in the world. And, so the race starts ridiculously hot. There's teams dropping out of heat exhaustion. And you're on a kayak. You're on a kayak with tons of water around you, and there's teams dropping out from heat exhaustion. And so we trek and we paddle and we kayak. We bushwhack through the jungle. We get lost. There's teams are getting lost, and you don't even know. We carry tracking devices in the races. And there's an SOS button, but you press the SOS button, there's no guarantee. Like, we're in Brazil. They speak Portuguese. There's bush pilots, and I mean, there's no guarantee you're going to get rescued when you get stuck out there in the middle of nowhere. So it's just pretty serious stuff. And we're trekking along. We're running out of water. You're in water world, but there's a trek we did that was about 50 kilometers up on this high ridge line, about 3,000 feet. And they said, oh yeah, there's tons of water up there. No water. And so then we trekked down. We finished that leg. And that was pretty insane. And then we get to the Water World trek, which was pretty unreal. It was just crystal clear water. There's stingrays, there's fish, there's alligators. We did this trek in the middle of the night, and so we have headlamps on, and you're looking out, and all you see is like these eyes looking back at you out in the middle of the swamp. It's a 50-kilometer trek straight into the Pantanal. You're looking out and seeing these eyes stare at you. You know they're alligators, and so it's full on stuff. And there was a team who stepped on a stingray, and the guy got barbed, and they're probably one of the most hardcore teams in the world. This Team Seagate from New Zealand. So we did this trek, and we finally found a dry spot. We were trekking through the water for about 8 hours, through water from ankle deep to waist deep to swimming for 8 hours. Yeah. You're swimming. You have your pack on. You're self-sufficient through these legs. There actually weren't any leeches, which was kind of surprising. But there's snakes. There's anacondas down there. This is legit. And but we were swimming through stuff, and you're just seeing these eyes stare at you, and you hope they don't come your way. We got pretty comfortable with the crocodiles, though. They were our friends by the end of the race. We finally found a dry spot, and this region is known to be like the most densely populated jaguar region in the world. And so we sleep. We just have these emergency bivvies. That's all we take for our sleeping. We slept probably over 7 days. I think we slept 18 hours, 14 hours. And, so we take these emergency bivvies. We got in that. We started a little fire because the mosquitoes and the bugs were just insane down there. We started a fire, tried to get it really smoldering, so it would create a lot of smoke, keep the mosquitoes away. And we take about a 2-hour nap at a time. So I'm sleeping, and I'm hearing this is towards the end of our sleep. All of a sudden I start hearing this roaring noise. It's like, roar! And this is like out in the jungle, and we're, in the middle of nowhere. I'm hearing this growling noise. It's like, holy shit, man, what is this? Like, I'm thinking it's a jaguar, and I'm kind of trying to stay as quiet as I can. I'm like sitting here in the thing, like it's a space blanket. So the thing, any ruffle you make is like ridiculously loud. So I'm just like trying to stay super calm. I'm like, oh fuck, what is this? And I'm like, every once in a while I hear this noise, like, I'm like, oh god. And I'm like, what is this noise? Like, I hope it's not a jaguar. So I wait. I just try to stay really calm and not move. And I'm trying to wait, because you do these races with teams of 4. And so I try to see if any of my other teammates say anything. I'm like, did you guys hear that noise? And I don't hear anything from them. They're just kind of, I think they're all pretty conked out. Like, you get pretty tired, and when you fall asleep, you're out for the count. But for some reason I woke up, and I was hearing this roaring noise. And so shortly after that, my alarm went off for us to wake up. We all woke up, and I tried to kind of play it a little casual. I was like, you guys hear anything? They're like, no, I was pretty out. I slept like a log. And so I was like, maybe it wasn't a jaguar. And so we kind of trekked down. We were out in the middle of this water world and the swamps and stuff. But there's these random ranching areas. And so there's these Portuguese people that live out in these areas, and they're actually cattle farmers. And so we trek along for maybe a half a mile more, and I see a horse, and the horse is making the same exact noise. And so it turned out, it was a couple horses out in the farm field, and that just kind of set my mind at ease. So that's my 7 days in Waterworld.
Well done, yes.
And just for fun, we're going to add in one more story from our story jam. Here's Sara talking about saving a baby at an ultramarathon.
My name's Sara, and I'm going to tell a little story about the time that I was in the middle of a race, Golden Gate Dirty 30. It was a good race. It was the 2015 Golden Gate Dirty 30, and it was the race that I actually saved a baby. Yeah, Golden Gate Dirty 30. This is my first time doing a 50K. I was jazzed. I was psyched for this race. I mean, I didn't know what to expect. And certainly saving a baby wasn't part of that expectation. But, you know, crazy things happen, especially on the trails. And that's one of the things I've learned about trail running is that you don't know what to expect out there. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the woods. So Dirty 30 morning comes along. It's a freezing cold day. And I was ready for it. I was like, I'm going to get into this. I'm going to give it my all. So, you know, I'm running along and I'm like, I feel good. I'm cruising. Get to mile 10, still cruising. I'm like, man, I thought I'd be tired by this point. Nope, not tired. Feeling the adrenaline. Mile 16 comes along. And I'm starting to get tired, but, you know, I'm still pushing. And all of a sudden I hear kind of like a little, wah! I hear this little kind of scream, and I'm like, that's weird. And I'm just keep going. But then I hear something louder, and this time, absolutely. Because I'm like, I'm feeling tired. Like, no, this isn't real. So, you know, I hear this louder cry this time, but this time I hear, help, help. And I'm like, what is going on? And I'm like competitive, and I see the girls next to me. They're like a little bit in front of me, and I'm wanting to get in the top 10, and I see them, and I'm like, again, wah! I gotta go check this out. So I go off. It's off in the woods a little bit. I go check it out, and they're like, first I find this woman, and she's lying down. She's got this giant like scratched, huge claw on her thigh, and I'm like, lady, ma'am, what happened? Are you okay? She's like, my baby. They took my baby. And I'm like, well, are you kidding? And she's like, no. They took my baby. So I go run, and I keep running. And I'm like, where is your baby? She's like, it's that way. And I'm like, okay. So I go run, and then I keep hearing it. And it's getting louder. Wah! And I get there, and, you know, lo and behold, there's this baby kind of, it's on the ground, it's close to a river, but in front of the baby, giant mountain lion, just like, I am not kidding. No, this is legit. So giant mountain lion prowling in front of this baby. And, you know, what I know about mountain lions, like, you're supposed to scream and, like, huck rocks at them and back away, but I'm like, you know, I'm like, this baby is in danger. I got to save this baby. And I'm like, what is a mountain lion doing prowling around a baby? But whatever. I was like, I just got to save it. And so I took some rocks, and I found a giant stick. And I'm like, you know, doing the prowl, doing the little dance with the baby and the mountain lion. And finally, you know, the mountain lion's kind of swiping at me. I swipe at it with a stick. Somehow, I don't even know. I think I blacked out. But I took this stick, and I wailed as hard as I could. Mountain lion just roars, and then it takes off. And so I grabbed the baby, and I ran back to Mom, and I'm like, Mom, I got the baby. Baby is safe. And she's like, you know, she's freaking out, obviously. And so, you know, finally at this point, there was some chaos had ensued. Some of the people, the volunteers came by. They had cell phones. They called some people. So the baby was in safe hands. I actually ended up finishing the race. I did. You know, the truth, I got top 10. I got 6th place in my age group. And so, but in the midst of it, like, the mountain lion came and kind of like took a swipe at me. I got knocked over. I fell down. I hit my knee. And so, you know, I finished 6th. And at the end of the race, they had this award for the bloodiest knee. And it turns out none of this story is true, but whoever made up the best story got $100 for the bloodiest knee. And so I won $100. It was awesome.
Well done.
That's my story.
Yeah. Beat that picture.